Well, thank you very much for that introduction. I'm just going to shut this down for a little bit. And I have to tell you, I'm really honored to be here today. It's great to chat with your president. But I have to tell you that I'm a huge admirer of Ralph Hauenstein's. And if you've been in this community for as long as I have now, and for those of you who haven't, he is just a gem. And both as a human being, as a true American hero, I think, for the things that he did. And I just adore him, and I think this is such an honor to speak at the center that was named for him. We also had a great conversation over lunchtime about anything from the election cycle to economic development leadership issues and political issues in Lansing. And actually my favorite subject was political science in high school, and as well as history. So we had just a fabulous conversation, and I really appreciate it. And I appreciate being here today. And when I was preparing my comments, really I was, the old saying of the more things change, the more they stay the same kind of came to mind when I was preparing these remarks. And I'm going to read you something real briefly. The competition of other states in economic development is real, and it is growing. Michigan is late in meeting this competition. We are derelict in our duty if we sit idly by and permit this condition to continue without striving to do something about it. Anybody have a guess who said this? I'll give you a hint. It's a State of the State address of a governor. Anybody? A clue? When? Who? 1949. Kim Siegler, the then governor of Michigan, made this comment about the furniture industry going to the south and the auto industry expanding somewhere else. So only to say is that, what are we going to do about it 50 years later, okay? A lot of white papers being written about Michigan and the state of Michigan, and another Lou Glazer had his second white paper out the other day about what we need to do to make Michigan better. We have analyzed the patient ad nauseum, I think. We know the patient has an illness. We finally have a budget, sort of, and a new tax structure, kind of. So the patient is no longer in ICU, but we need to have a vision from Lansing that folds into the vision that people have locally, people like President Haas and others, and move forward. What do we want this state to look like 20 years from now? Who are we going to be? There are bright people in the state who can do that, and I don't want to throw people in Lansing in front of the bus, but it's very frustrating to all of us who are struggling with, who have a vision for our university, who have a vision for our region, that selling that vision or having somebody in Lansing provide that vision is just darn hard. I understand the day-to-day, but we know what needs to be done, and it is more, in my opinion, than just passing another tax bill. And it is more than pieces and parts. Somebody has to provide a vision, somebody has to have a mission, and then we can figure out how we're going to get there. And you have a strategic plan, I have a strategic plan. I'm going to talk about the right places in a moment, but we really do need to move forward, and it needs to be more than just being the cheapest tax state in the country. We talked about this over lunch, and it's very easy to listen to some folks who think if we just cut the taxes a little more, everybody will come here. But the knowledge worker of today doesn't go to the cheapest place. We don't want to be Mississippi or Alabama or Louisiana. I'm sorry, I don't want to throw those states in front of the bus. But if you're looking at where their people are successful, where regions are successful, Boston corridor, San Diego corridor, San Francisco corridor, they're not the cheapest taxes, no matter what the Wall Street Journal will tell you. Now, I can't market Boston or and San Francisco. It really is a pretty high tax state. But by the same token, I don't want to market West Virginia either. And we have to really decide what we want to be. We put the world on wheels. We put the world on wheels with unskilled, highly paid labor. We created a huge middle class. And those jobs are gone. And they truly are gone forever. I mean, General Motors is going to do another 75,000 buyouts. There's one issue of what are we going to do with people that have low skills and high wages, How do we retrain them? I'm not going to talk about that much today, but it is really, at the end of the day, we talk about that at lunch, and I'll talk about it at the end, show you a little video at the end. It is about a talent-driven world, and it is a flat world. I talked to a young man yesterday who just moved back here after 18 years living overseas in Italy, in Nizhny Novgorod, Siberia. His brother lives in Shanghai. He's lived in Germany. He was in his car with his wife in Rome, his brother in Shanghai on his BlackBerry. Now, when I moved to the United States, I had to dial up the operator to have a call to my mom patched through. You know, now I sit in a traffic jam someplace and call my mother and say, how are you doing? She still lives in Germany. So it's a world where Beijing, Bangalore, and Baltimore are neighbors. It's your world. You grew up with this technology. So, you know, we can no longer figure that it's, you know, our neighbor is our competitor is just not next door anymore. When Kim Siegler said this, it was Steelcase, Herman Miller, and Hayworth. Their competitors are now in China making way cheaper office furniture. So how are they going to survive in this millennium? And I think it has to be done with talent, quite frankly. So, you know, I've done my thing about Lansing. I'm very frustrated with them. And we're all looking for that vision out of Lansing. In the meantime, what are we doing in West Michigan about our part of the world, and how are we trying to improve it and play a role? I don't know how much you know about the Right Place. We were created about 1984 as a private-public partnership for economic development by a group of private business leaders. Jay Van Andel, Fred Meyer, Bob Pugh, then the CEO of Steelcase, the CEO of Spartan Foods, the CEO of the largest banks, all of the people that built this university, quite frankly, decided back in '84, we need a better economic development program, we need a better economic development strategy, and here's why. It was enlightened self-interest, first of all, and that's okay. Enlightened self-interest is a good thing. But they said, if we don't have a community, a region that is successful, I can't attract talent from someplace else. I mean, Jay Van Andel said that to me one day. I can't attract somebody to a community that's not thriving because people don't want to come. And yes, we can talk about the weather, but I can't change the weather. So, you know, it's one of those things, what are you going to do about the weather? I can't. Boston is snowed in today. So, but even back then, it was about business retention and attraction, but it was also about the talent that goes with it. So that's really why they started this organization. We are a private-public partnership. We raise a lot of our money for the work that I do from local companies as well as local communities like the city of Grand Rapids, etc. We have really 5 strategic priorities. Number 1, the retention, expansion, and attraction of jobs. The first thing we need to do is keep what we have. So we call on a lot of manufacturing companies, and yes, manufacturing is okay. They will live, they will survive, they will reposition themselves. Not all of them, but we cannot afford, for all kinds of reasons, to have all of it go elsewhere. We talked over lunch. Alternative energy. Why can't we retool our manufacturers to supply the alternative energy sector? If you want to make medical devices, they have to be manufactured somewhere. Do we want to send it overseas, or do we want to do that here? So we want to make sure that our manufacturing companies stay strong and stay local. Number 2, expansions. We don't want them to go do this somewhere else. So we probably know every manufacturer in this area pretty well. So if they have a plan to potentially go elsewhere and shop, we want to be sure that they call us first and say, make us a deal too. We did that with X-Rite. They almost moved to South Carolina. They were very close to closing the entire plant down and moving 300 people who make $60,000 a year plus out of here. So we build a package of incentives, local and state, labor training to tax incentives, to incentives on buildings, and kept them here and moved them from Granville to Kentwood. Very important. They now have over 400 people. They're highly research driven. I just connected their CEO to Paul Plutkowski for potential internships, because they want to grow talent here. They want to do interns with engineering students and grow them here. But they do research in Zurich, they do research in Boston, but their headquarters is here, and we almost lost them. So very, very important. And it takes you 5 times as long to get a new company to locate someplace than it does to keep the old one that you have. So that's critical. Attraction. We are the marketing folks for this region, and we go all over the world to do that. We have 80 foreign-owned companies in this area. Almost 40 of them are from Germany. So we go to Western Europe to attract, but we also go to the Far East to attract. China, Japan, and Korea. And when I first took this job 20 years ago, it was pretty much around the auto industry and around the furniture industry. Well, today it's also around the life sciences and alternative energy prospects, because we want to get into those new industries as well. That's number one. Number two is the life sciences and all of the emerging industries that I think we can capture on. Now, if you would have asked me 11 or 12 years ago that I, Birgit Klohs, would be marketing life sciences, medical device companies, WIMSTI, which of course is a collaborative between the university, the Right Place, the City of Grand Rapids, Van Andel Institute, Spectrum Health, and St. Mary's, and obviously is housed up at the Cook DeVos Center, that we would be marketing this area as a potential life sciences cluster? No way. But the Van Andel Institute birth back in 1996 gave an impetus to all kinds of that development. It gave birth to the Cook DeVos Center on Michigan Street Hill. They wanted to be close to the Institute. It gave birth to the expansion of Spectrum Health. They did it because they wanted to co-locate with the research that was going on at the Institute. And it certainly gave birth to the Michigan State Med School. So you really have a four-legged stool. You have the hospitals, you have the universities, GVSU and Michigan State, and you have the Van Andel Research Institute. That's a very powerful combination. We also co-market our life sciences infrastructure with our friends down in Kalamazoo. Even though Pfizer has obviously downsized a lot, they still have extraordinary life sciences infrastructure. So when we go to a bio show or we go overseas, we often go along, because it's an hour drive from here to Kalamazoo. So if President Haas is trying to attract a PhD professor with a trailing spouse, well, maybe there's a job at Pfizer or there's a job at Perrigo, okay? I mean, this is a very, very powerful collaborative to say we have life sciences infrastructure, and in a big city like Boston, traveling 50 minutes is about 10 miles, right? We have to get over this, that we're not part of the same region, and really this is very much a regional effort. Number two, on the emerging, again, big collaboration with the university is all around alternative energy. The Right Place, the West Michigan Strategic Alliance, the university, and MAREC and Muskegon, and our economic development partners put out a big report on the opportunities that our companies can take advantage of around alternative energy. And we need to do that probably as much as life sciences. It's on our website, by the way. It's a pretty big report, and we think we can play a role in two areas. One, how do we transition our manufacturers to make other parts? To make parts for solar, to make parts for wind turbines, to make parts for the hydroelectric, whatever it is. How can we take that knowledge and transfer it? But also the potential attraction of a solar company or a wind turbine company that actually generates the electricity to light your home. Fred Keller is, of course, a huge leader in this, and Fred actually has 2 windmills on his buildings now. He's making small windmills that could actually fit in your backyard. And he has them on his manufacturing plant out in Cascade Township. So on March 11th, the university, Right Place, WIMSA, and the Michigan Economic Development Corporation are hosting a big conference right here on alternative energy where we can play. And of course, as I said earlier, we are already marketing and looking for those kind of companies to also bring here, as well as transition our companies into those new products. What do we need out of Lansing? We need something called a renewable portfolio standard. Very, very critical. If we don't have an RPS standard, our utilities, whether they are municipals or consumers' energy, cannot be compelled to put the electricity generated from a company making wind power and put it on the grid. If it's not on the grid, we can't flip the light switch. So we are unfortunately behind on this one as well. 28 states have renewable portfolio standards. And people like me and others and Imad Mahawili up at Marek are pushing like crazy to get a renewable portfolio standard. If you want to see what a renewable portfolio standard does for a state, look at Texas. They have the largest wind farms in this country generating wind energy. Look at California. And Oregon is making a big play in solar. So that is what it does. When you have a standard like that, you can have a serious conversation with somebody in that industry. We do have a solar company up in Greenville. For those of you from the area, obviously a little north of here, United Solar Ovonics is now employing 400 in their second plant to make thin film solar panels, and they're all going to Europe. 95, which is a good thing in a lot of ways. Exporting goods out of here is good, brings wealth into the community, but that's where it's going because the Europeans are leaders in saying we need to reduce energy costs and we need to get off oil. And so, they are taking almost all of their production. So retention, expansion, attraction, emerging industries. Third is manufacturing innovation. I touched on it, that we really believe we have a manufacturing sector that is innovative. We received part of the WIRED grant. I don't know if you're familiar with that, Workforce Innovation in Regional Economic Development. And with our economic development partners in our 7-county region, created a business plan that is creating something called Innovation Works. And it is a commercialization infrastructure for alternative energy, for sustainable products. We talked about that as well. Your trash is my treasure. We have to do a lot more recycling. But anything, if you have an idea, you can log on an innovation portal, on an idea portal starting Monday, and we can match your intellectual property up with somebody who's looking for it or vice versa. So it's it could be intellectual property generated by a professor at GVSU who wants to log it on, and we find a manufacturer who could actually do it. Would be validated, and the manufacturer might say, I could really use that. Or we have a manufacturer who goes on and says, by the way, I'm looking to improve my blow molding process, and we'll go out and find the professor or the inventor who could help him do that. So it's a mining for new intellectual property. It is connecting the professor with the idea with the manufacturer who could make it, or it is coaching then that inventor through the process from A to Z until he or she actually has a product to commercialize. So it's a collaborative between Right Place, universities, and all the economic development organizations in the 7-county area. It's very literally brand new. Number 4, our strategic priority is urban redevelopment. Place matters again. Don't you all want to be in a city that's kind of nifty, where you can go out downtown, where you have some bars, where you have nightlife, where you have cool things to do? Well, when I moved to the United States from Europe, I felt like I fell into a big hole sometimes because there were a half a dozen cities, and I love this country, don't misunderstand me, it's beautiful, but the cities had been abandoned. We abandoned our core. When I moved to Grand Rapids, they rolled the sidewalks up at 7 o'clock at night and we all went home. Well, look at what's happened over the last 15 years. You were too young then, but I remember because I was doing this job. Governor Engler created a couple of key pieces of legislation. One is called Renaissance Zones, and one is called brownfields. And for those of you who are already out working, and I see somebody shaking their head from Wyoming, we have used those 2 laws to a large extent in our communities here to revitalize our cities, to take old properties and redo them. And what you see in this area is just a huge push for that. Without those 2 laws, by the way, we were getting nowhere. We would approach developers back 15 years ago and said, why don't you do that over here? I can't make money doing that. At the end of the day, it's not a charity developing real estate. But once those 2 laws were passed, it became the thing to do. And what has happened, we talked about Richard Florida's book, The Creative Class. They want to live in robust urban environments. So place matters again. And I think Grand Rapids has turned the corner in terms of, and really in the whole region, Muskegon is trying a downtown. Holland has a great downtown. I know Wyoming is trying to redo the 28th Street corridor. But it's those kind of laws and that kind of leadership really led us to some places where we couldn't go at that time. And this area has taken advantage of those laws probably more than anybody. In fact, I was told in Lansing a couple weeks ago, you've got enough brownfield applications, you've got to share a little bit. I said, you're punishing me for being successful. That's not really appreciated. But, and it also aids in attraction of talent. When the university or Spectrum or Perigo or whoever is trying to attract talent, they come to a community, they want to look around and say, what's here, what does it look like? What can I do afterwards? And I'll talk about talent attraction in just a minute. So that's really our fourth strategic priority, is the whole idea of urban redevelopment. And you don't just find brownfields in the city of Grand Rapids or the city of Wyoming. We're helping the city of Nowego right now. We helped the city of Sparta clean up a big mess that was left by a foundry. So, you know, a lot of contaminated property in older communities because we've always had industry. And rather than using a green field somewhere out in Lowell, let's redevelop what we have first in the already urbanized areas of Grand Rapids, Wyoming, and Walker, and do infill development before we plow over another field. Because if you're talking about quality of life, which everybody does, I would like some green space, personally speaking, and you don't have to just keep pushing out and out and out. So, and all of those sites are already served by water, sewer, roads, and all the infrastructure. And rather than building another 10 miles of line someplace in a beautiful cornfield or whatever, why not reuse what we have first? And I think the right place, in collaboration with our communities, have done a very good job in taking advantage of that and really re-energizing those. And by the way, this business is, I like to call it, it's a team sport. I don't do this by myself. I can't promise help from the engineering school at GVSU if I don't have a good relationship with Paul. And so, or with a municipality like Wyoming or Grand Rapids, or you name them. So it really is when we have a customer, a company, or somebody, it's our community, the state, the right place, and our other partners, whether it's the community college or GVSU or you name it. So that's the only way it works. Our fifth strategic priority is really regionalism. GVSU's headquarters is really in another county. Tom was telling me that he's collaborating with GRCC in Holland and in Muskegon with their community college. And really what it means is we can't compete if we compete against each other. If something bad happens, when Pfizer downsized in Kalamazoo, believe me, it impacted us. Because when we lose that talent in Kalamazoo, it impacts us. When Steelcase downsizes and we lose talent to another state, it impacts Kalamazoo and Holland. So while you all may live in Wyoming or Grand Rapids or Nowego or Fremont or wherever, think regionally. I give you a little story. I was when I went to China for the first time a couple of years ago. Ray DeWinkle, who's a graduate, goes quite often and for attraction purposes. This very articulate young Chinese man named Shui, Ron Shui, picked me up, spoke perfect English, obviously with a Chinese accent, graduate of U of M Law School, knew Grand Rapids because everybody in China knew Amway. And I'm not kidding. I mean, it's an extraordinarily well-respected company over there. But he kept telling me that I went to a city called Xiamen. What a beautiful small town this is. You came to the most beautiful small community in China. And we're in, and then I had 2 more meetings and I finally said, okay, how small is small? It's only 2 million people. So when you think of our region of 7 counties, Kent, Ottawa, Muskegon, Allegan, Barrie, Ionia, and Nowego, we have 1.3 million people. When I made my presentation to about 300 Chinese, and I was putting it together, Ray said to me, don't put the number down. 1.3 million does not register over there. Make it I think we're the 36th largest metro area or something like that. That resonates very differently. So, and it's true. I mean, so when I say we have to think regionally, and what's good for Nowego and Gerber is good for the rest of us, we really have to do that. Political boundaries, particularly when you talk to a company who wants to locate here, they don't really care. They're like, oh no, is it different in Wyoming and it's different in Grand Rapids and it's different in Kentwood? Birgit, just tell me how to do business here. I don't care where I end up. So political boundaries, mayors don't often like to hear this, become hindrances, not necessarily a help. So when we go out and market, we market this, the infrastructure, the talent of this whole area, period. So where do we have some holes? One of them is a workforce issue, and I already touched on it, and we touched on it over lunch. Because we all believe truly that we're in the middle of a talent-driven economy. And I don't just necessarily mean talent that's a PhD molecular biologist. Talent, period. We are hearing from our manufacturers that they have labor shortages. Now, if you think about the unemployment rate in Michigan, that sounds like a silly thing to say, but we're talking about skilled labor. We're talking about labor that knows how to deal with computers and high-tech equipment. You're not going to put somebody behind $1 million piece of equipment who is not well-trained. Whether that's a young 2-year graduate from the community college or a 4-year engineering grad. It just doesn't happen anymore. In fact, Chrysler, Daimler, used to be Daimler Chrysler, Mitsubishi and Hyundai have a big new plant over in the Detroit area in Washtenaw County, in Dundee, not far from Cabela's, making engines, 1.8 million engines a year for those 4 car companies. It's really a global engine. It's actually called GEMA, the Global Engine Manufacturing Alliance. They will not hire anybody who either doesn't have 5 years of journeyman experience or 2 years of post-high school education. And the reason they're stayed in Michigan, because they had a really big push to go south to the Mason-Dixon line, is because of our 2-year community college system in Michigan. It puts out twice as many graduates as almost any other community college system in the country. That's why they stayed there. It was truly a talent-driven decision. They're also UIW, which is very interesting because they only have 3 job classifications. And a normal UIW plant has over 100. So very different model, but it really is talent-driven. So education, education, education is the key. Definitely without a high school diploma, forget it. Probably 2 years technical training at a minimum, and obviously college. And that brings up again, what are we getting out of Lansing? How can we convince people that funding education then becomes a key issue for this state? Our college graduation rate is not acceptable. It shouldn't be acceptable. And I know I'm preaching to the converted. We talked about it at lunch as well. And also only 27% of Michigan parents believe that it's important to have post-high school education or a college degree. So whoever you can influence in your sphere of influence, you need to do that, because we keep preaching to the converted. I mean, I'm looking at college graduates, but it's a real stumbling block. How do you convince a parent that you have to send that kid to school, or that child will make $8.50 an hour at some low-level job? And you cannot. That's not a living wage. We need to become more risk takers again in this area. This community is made up of entrepreneurs. If you think about it, it's names on this building, on these buildings, on the whole university campus. The founders of my organization are all entrepreneurs. Van Andel, DeVos, Meyer, Eberhard, you name them. We are living on their legacy money, if you will. Where are the next entrepreneurs coming from? We need venture capital in this community. We don't have it. We have an equity fund. We have venture capital in Kalamazoo. We have venture capital in Ann Arbor. Even the state of Michigan is now doing venture capital. We don't have a fund here. We have some angels. Don't discount those. But we really need to engender again in this community, and people like you, that taking a risk and starting a business is okay. Keith Brophy is a good example. He's become a very successful entrepreneur. We have other young entrepreneurs here. We need more like them. Who is the next Lax Enterprises? I don't know, but they got to be out there. So venture capital is really a key component of that as well. And we talked a little bit about talent attraction. We put a little booklet out about a year ago this month. I was invited by 12 local companies. Perigo, Steelcase, X-Rite, Michigan State University's med school, and about a dozen others. Meyer, Wolverine Worldwide, and they basically said we have a hard time attracting people here. How can you help us? You market this community already, help us. Well, one outgrowth of that help is a very cool little booklet, 57 things you never knew about West Michigan in Greater Grand Rapids, just kind of fun that they can stick into a mailer from the HR department. I'll show you a very brief video on that's now on our website and on YouTube for talent attraction, just talking, and it's mostly much younger people than are normally in our videos. It's on our website, www.rightplace.org/live, and you can download it and pass it on and so on and so forth. And then the next step in this talent attraction process is we're meeting in a couple of weeks with about that same dozen companies to establish not the right place, but a collaborative, sort of a concierge service, that if somebody comes here, wants to move here to take a job at Spectrum or the university or you name it, with or without a trailing spouse, there will be somebody who takes that individual around and introduces him to the resources in this community as a person who wants to live here. We do it for a company that wants to move here, which is a different process because they're looking at different things. Some are the same, some are not. But there's a real need. There are 780 jobs going, high-paying jobs going begging at a dozen companies right now. If we could get 500 of them, that's 500 homes that would get sold. So we are taking, think about the ripple of, that kind of a job at a Spectrum, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Whether that, and this doesn't include nurses. Those are individuals who are looking for in the IT departments, financial, and so on and so forth. So talent really has become a key driver. So I'll close here because you are part of that talent. You are part of the future of this region. And I really mean that sincerely. I hope you stay. We need you to stay. There are opportunities here. Remember, in all kind of downtimes, there's always opportunities if you choose to see them. Michigan right now has 85,000 jobs going begging. If you read the newspaper, you don't know that, but they are in healthcare, in financial services, they're in local governments, but they're here. They may no longer be at General Motors, but there are jobs in Michigan to be had. So I hope that you play a role in making this region what you want it to be. So thank you very much, and I'll answer some questions. I'm leading our annual report and those booklets, and Mandy, I think, is going to distribute them. Do you want to just play that real quickly?
Let's play that first.
It's just kind of fun.
Q&A. So hold your questions for a minute, please.
Are we on time, or are we okay?
No, we're doing great.
Okay.
Birgit, we could keep you all afternoon.
Yeah. Actually, I enjoy the question and answer really fast. Gives you an opportunity to.
Starting back up here.
We live in West Michigan.
I live in West Michigan. I live in West Michigan.
I live in West Michigan.
I live in West Michigan.
This is right here in Grand Rapids. Grand Rapids really holds the most opportunity for growth.
We're like at the tipping point of really making our community that much cooler.
The condos and the boom downtown, people really want to live here.
We're seeing more and more people move into West Michigan, into Grand Rapids, that are from different places.
I just love it here. It's clean, it's beautiful, summertime is great.
The timing of the seasons are just great.
10 o'clock in a winter night, it's like being on the moon, everything's so quiet.
It's hard to go away from Michigan in the summer. I mean, part of the changing season really makes you value the summer and the spring and the fall.
One of my favorite seasons is fall, and that has a lot to do with the colors. If you're a cross-country skier, and the wintertime is great. Lake Michigan is nearby, which I'm completely in love with. I've had friends that came in from Texas and thought it was the ocean. It's so beautiful.
With all the nice beaches that are just like half an hour away from here, it's just going on vacation.
You can get outside of the city quickly, you can get
either walk everywhere or use public transportation.
You can get around really easy.
It only takes me about 7 minutes to get to work every morning. So, and on a bad day, it takes me about 10 minutes. I only fill my car's gas tank up once a month. We live in Kentwood. I live in downtown Grand Rapids.
I live in the East Hills neighborhood,
Ottawa Hills neighborhood.
Ada, Michigan.
Holland, Michigan. There's a lot of big old houses.
Young people are moving into the neighborhood, fixing up old houses. Favorite part about it is that I can own real estate. At the age of 22, I bought that place.
It's actually a lot better for me and my wife. No, she doesn't have to work.
If someone's sick, you know, your neighbors bring over soup for someone to take care of your kids.
It's so much fun to like be in this kind of an environment where we have so much giving.
The Midwest mentality is much more family-centered.
There's plenty of different parks.
My daughter, who's in second grade, she feels comfortable walking home.
You can open the door, the kids run outside and they find other kids and you see them out there playing.
What's new and exciting is this art museum I'm standing by right now. I could never imagine that we would have an art museum like this in my city.
We're the first city in the country to have a LEED certified art museum.
We're always looking for culture, and I think really what's happening with Grand Rapids these days is we're developing that.
The fact that there are many venues to perform is really exciting, and the chances to grow artistically is great.
There's the symphony, the Broadway Theater Guild.
There's a wonderful children's museum.
A great arts district.
Visiting the downtown public library, walking along the river.
It's really become a 24-hour city.
There's places to be Monday through Friday now, not just Friday and Saturday. Fun places to, hang out at night, eat and drink. Anything from wine bars to the dance clubs to the amazing house parties.
We have really great shopping districts.
We like to go to the farmer's market.
There's a romanticism to our lit bridges, our walkways, our boardwalks downtown.
To come downtown and go to the Dynamo Arena and watch the Grand Rapids Griffins, it's really a treat.
Our family loves going to the Whitecaps games. We've usually taken a couple games a year.
This is Golf Kevin. Well, let's go, Chicago, Michigan.
It's been a good place for me to be as a music lover because there are a lot of opportunities, whether it's big or small.
Prince has been here, Eric Clapton.
Just here in Florida.
If you like the big names, you can go to the arena. If you like the smaller names, you can go to one of the smaller venues.
Grand Rapids, when I first moved here, was much different from where I came from.
A lot of people, when they come here, are surprised.
It's just a matter of introducing all that this community has to offer. Once they come, almost 99.9% have loved it once they get here.
So small in the right way. It's not small like a little town, it's small like a little big city. A small town that's big, or a big town that's small. I can never figure out which to call it.
You're rolling on that, too. I knew it.
Was that good? That's what I got.
Just a fun piece. And people can send to folks who might consider moving here, don't know anything much about us. So.
Well, you have some time for questions?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. Well, the floor is yours.
Yes.
I want to start by thanking you. Quite possibly, this is kind of the capstone of what I've been preaching about since I've been in my undergraduate.
Well, you need to run for office. I figure that you have to run for public office.
Wow, it's just really fantastic, and it's kind of serendipitous because I'm working on a project right now in Student Senate, which is one of my other activities outside of this, and it's called Campaign Michigan, and literally it's focusing on Michigan and the highlights that we have to keep the human capital that we develop right here, because as we know, we have a large exodus of students that get their degree and then they leave our state, and it's really sad for me because this is my home. I plan on staying and living, and I hope my colleagues will consider doing the same. But how do we talk to students? We're talking to businesses and we're talking to industry. How do we talk to us? How do we keep us in this particular area? How do we market Michigan as, Oregon or Washington or Massachusetts or Nevada, these places that people are going that are the new dynamos for our generation?
I think a lot of that conversation has to really take place amongst the young people, because I feel sometimes out of my depth with you millennials. I have one of you guys on my staff who's a graduate from here. And there is a group of young folks who are meeting regularly to exactly discuss what you just talked about. I think just for me or for Tom or for Gleaves to say, stay, there really needs to be a more of a grassroots, in my opinion, of the students who are now in school or just graduated, I met one of your young graduates here, and a young African-American man who was a photographer for one of the local video studios. He came and did a video of me for whatever, about a year ago. And we started to talk. And I said, so no, I'm from the Detroit area. I came here to go to GVSU. I got a really good job. I like it here, but I don't get connected once I left school. So we connected him to MAP, the Multi-Racial Association of Professionals, and it's hosted by the chamber. I said, grab this young man before he goes to Chicago, okay? Because it's about talent, but it's also about diverse talent, and it's about culturally competent talent. If you go around the world today, they don't all look like Birgit. But that was a one-time thing. How do we capture that more? I think that would be an interesting project, quite frankly, for you guys to figure out how do we connect to our young colleagues, to tell them that, listen, there are things to do here. You have weather in Boston. In fact, I was told by an out-of-towner the other day who's quite the entrepreneurship guru and innovation guru, a fellow by the name of Doug Hall. He said, you have almost all the same amenities with the water, your parks, kayaking that Oregon does. Why don't you talk about it? Well, I do. But, we do market all of that, but how do we reach a larger audience, particularly of people your age? I don't have the total answer, but I really do believe it has to be a lot more word of mouth or, associating with your own age group. Because it can't just be Birgit talking about that, while I can, and I'm very passionate about this community, it would be like talking to your mother who says, oh, don't leave town. Yeah, so how do you do that? It's a very good question. Now, I think GVSU has a fabulous record in keeping your graduates, right? I mean, one of the best in the state. And when people tell me, well, everybody leaves town, but this university keeps a lot of its graduate right here.
Yeah, of those that are working, 88% in Michigan, 79% in West Michigan.
Right. So that's a pretty darn.
We can still look towards 45,000 of our alums living in the Tri-County region.
And that's a really good track record. The other thing that I've said a number of times to all of the universities is go through your alumni records and find out where your most successful graduates are and help us attract them back, okay? Maybe there is a really successful business person who graduated one of the first years from GVSU and now lives and made a lot of money, I don't know where, and see if that individual doesn't want to move back. Boomerangs are acceptable. And in fact, boomerangs are just fine. So, but are there talented individuals who graduated from our institutions who already have a relationship with the state? Who can either come back as mentors to young people like you, who can come back as venture capitalists, who could come back as the CEO of a startup company. Because often what you happen with an entrepreneurial startup, the inventor is brilliant and doesn't know how to run a business. But you need somebody to do that. How can we start matching those resources as well? That's another one. I don't have the answer to it, but I think we have enough graduates out of this state who could potentially be very successful. University of Florida is doing a very interesting thing, and I found this out at a conference I attended. Rather than just asking their graduates who've become very successful and wealthy to write a check to the development office, they're tying it more into saying, come back and invest in the companies that we're creating through our research, and come back and help us run those companies. And they're actually getting more money for the development office because they're asking for more than just a check, which I thought was pretty creative. So that may be another opportunity to keep talent and bring talent. I can tell you Spectrum Health just attracted 2 pediatric heart surgeons for the DeVos Children's Hospital by figuring out that there was a graduate, 2 people from Michigan living in Houston, and they saw an opportunity. And they already knew the weather and all the stuff that went with it. And so, it's also that identification potentially of, who is from this state, who has been here, who has lived here, and who could come back. So in addition to keeping you. So, sorry, long answer to a very insightful question. I'm serious, by the way. You in politics might be we need smart politicians. Yes.
Well, you mentioned that you have the concierge service individuals coming up. And I was wondering what other things might be on the horizon that you can tell us about.
Well, we are going through our strategic planning process this year for the next 5 years. The most recent thing we did is this Innovation Works program. We don't change our strategic plan sort of nilly-willy. We set it for 5 years, and then we change our tactics depending on the changing of the world. But we try to really stick to our knitting in terms of what our work is, and get involved in key strategic areas in addition to what we do. One of the things that we're heavily involved in, that you may or may not have read in the newspaper, is trying to attract a low-cost airline to the area. The issue of the airport was in the paper the other day, so I'm not speaking out of school. But we are leaking an awful lot of traffic out of Grand Rapids to Detroit or to Chicago. That means, every day 500 people out of Kent County or West Michigan are driving either to Detroit or driving to Chicago to catch a plane, which means that the less flyers, because after 9/11, the big airlines started giving us either smaller planes, which reduced our capacity, or pulled flights altogether because people stopped flying. And Gerald R. Ford International hasn't gotten bigger planes again, and they have not reinstalled the flights that have been dropped. So if you're trying to fly out of here, you may have a hard time getting a flight because they have load capacity now of over 80%, which means essentially planes are full all the time, coming and going. And our costs have risen because we have demand that isn't met by supply, which means cost goes up. And we're the only community in our size region that doesn't have what's called a low-cost carrier, like a JetBlue or an AirTran or whatever, which drives our prices up. So that's a very big issue, both for business as well as personal travel. I know a lot of my staff members with children drive to Detroit because you can often save $200 a ticket. And that makes certainly up for the parking. So that's another issue that, while it isn't directly ours, it impacts the work we do, and we collaborate with other organizations like the Convention and Visitors Bureau and the Chamber of Commerce, and helping the airport try to figure out how we can fix that problem. So that's another thing we're involved in. So you had it?
Well, you're in a room with a bunch of apprentice leaders. All of these
Absolutely.
people are in formation to become great
Yep.
leaders in whatever endeavors they're going to choose in the future. Birgit, you've worked around a lot of leaders. What are the 3 top leadership traits? Would you
Oh,
say?
God, I knew you were going to ask me that, or something
It's
like
my
it.
job,
Have a vision. Bring people into that vision. You can't impose it on anybody. You have to really engender that enthusiasm you can't just tell somebody, this is my vision, just buy into it and away we go. Create a mission and a strategy around that, with that team, to decide where you're going to go and then execute. I think you have to be able to engender enthusiasm in your team. I mean, if you meet any one of my people and of my staff members, and they're not my people, they're my colleagues, they are all bought into our mission of making this region successful. And you can't do that if they don't. Honesty, integrity, I mean, I know that's more than 3.
That's good.
Straightforwardness, which I come to by birth, from where I'm from. And authenticity is probably, to me, the most important thing. Be true to who you are. I mean, if you can't be authentic, and sometimes in my case I have to preface this with I'm going to be my German self, but I will always be true to myself. I don't dissemble terribly well, but so to me authenticity is probably one of those things that's very important to me from another person too. Okay.
As a follow-up to that, what would you say to students who are at the end of their careers as students the best preparation for them to take those next steps to become really effective leaders?
If you are, I have benefited from mentors.
Yeah.
In my case, they were all males because of my generation. But somebody a long time ago gave me an opportunity in this business. I didn't even have my degree yet. I was a young immigrant working full-time and going to school part-time at Western down in Benton Harbor, St. Joe on their off-campus. But he mentored me. When I started to develop, I had another mentor. This was a very successful attorney, but get a really good mentor who will give you feedback that's honest, that's open, that's authentic, where you can, and someone you can learn from and respect. It could be in your job, it could be in your church, it could be in an organization. We talked before lunch about Inforum, which is a women's organization for professional women with about 400 members. So that you can learn from somebody else's leadership skills. And then observe. I learned a ton from just observing how my board worked. When I took this job, my first board chair was Jay Van Andel, and after that, people like Pat Quinn from Spartan Foods and John Kennedy and David Van Andel and others, observing how a good leader functions, how they treat their staff, how they run a meeting. You know, it's a lot of you never stop learning. I'm still observing my board members. I'm still learning from people like Tom. That's just, you never stop. But get good mentors, and it won't be the same one. And if you're in a small organization like I was, I've always basically worked for small organizations, except when I worked at Prince for a while. Learned a lot from just the way he ran his business and his philosophy. Then find yourself a mentor outside of your own organization. It could be a business leader with whom you meet regularly. And what I find about West Michigan is that everybody here is pretty willing to share. When we have somebody, for instance, who comes in and says, I'm looking for a job, can you connect me? I've never had somebody say, I don't want to meet with you. So mentoring, observing, but I think mentoring to me was one of the biggest things in my career outside of my formal education.
Do you consciously mentor?
Yes. Sometimes consciously, where I've been asked, would you mentor me? Mostly young women. Sometimes unconsciously, and a young woman who's leaving the area said, you've been a great mentor to me, and I'm like, hey, what? To the earlier point, she was doing it. I served on her board, and she's moving on to a much bigger job, and it was just an observation mentoring. Or we would have lunch occasionally, and she'd ask me for input on how would you handle this. And I still go out and say, how would you handle this? So I still have mentors. Okay.
Any other questions? Jude?
Thanks very much.
All right, thank you.